The information provided is for educational purposes and is not intended as medical advice or a substitute for the medical advice of a physician or another qualified healthcare professional. We do not aim to diagnose, treat, cure or prevent any illness or disease. You should always consult with a doctor or other healthcare professional for medical advice or information about diagnosis and treatment. The information in this presentation has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration or any other medical body. So this is a new guest to my channel, the Live, Love, Learn podcast, and one that I have been meaning to connect with for at least 3 or 4 years. So I am delighted to introduce you all to Clive DeCarle. And Clive, I think of you of everything that anyone needs to know about rebalancing their body naturally using vitamins and minerals. You're the man. So we're going to really dive into that. So before we really get into the subject matter today, which I'm really calling Vitamins and Minerals 101, everything we need to know, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you got fascinated into rebalancing the body naturally.
Well, about 40 years ago, when I was in my very early 30s, I made an interesting decision. I decided to go to a doctor, and previously I'd been using homeopathy or whatever. And I went to a doctor with something really trivial, and he said, here's an antibiotic, that'll fix it. A few weeks later, I've become type 1 diabetic. I've got rheumatoid arthritis so badly that one morning I can't get out of bed. I try to get dressed. I can't. I am stuck. Luckily, there was somebody there to rescue me, and they put me in hospital. And I was there for weeks and weeks and weeks, just getting worse. And they kept on offering me drugs. And I kept on saying, look, there's something wrong with me, but I don't think it's drug deficiency. You know, I'm not low on pharmaceuticals. And they gave up. I said, well, there's nothing we can do. So that coincided perfectly with the books I'd been reading in hospital. I had a book prop, so I could turn the page, I just couldn't lift the book. Anyway, I realized that the antibiotic had really knocked out the friendly bacteria and friendly fungus and stuff that works with us. And I started taking a number of supplements. I changed my diet because I've become type 1 diabetic, and that's the one thing I haven't been able to get to the bottom of, how to fix that one. Still trying, however. So over a period of time, I took primarily as number 1 magnesium. That was the big one, because what had happened with arthritis is I'd got calcium buildups, and that had made things inflamed and uncomfortable and painful. And magnesium dissolves calcium. It's super simple. So a lot of people think, well, okay, I've heard about magnesium, and they go to a high street shop or the supermarket to buy it. Well, you know, up until a few years ago, Holland and Barrett, for instance, were owned by the Carlyle Group, who are arms dealers. You know, there's a slight conflict of interest between arms dealers and health stores. You know, somebody else owns them now. But this is the case with many of the supplement companies that have well-known names that are often people's first choice. They don't know who actually owns them and why those supplements in some cases might not be working quite as well as others. So once I'd realized that magnesium and a few other things, vitamin C, a few things, had sorted me out completely, because the arthritis hasn't come back in 40 years. You know, I looked like I was 90 years old if you looked at my joints. And so I started looking into magnesium as one of the first things, because there are so many different types out there. There's magnesium hydroxide, which works very well for drain cleaning. You know, if you've got a blocked sink, you know, that'll do, but you wouldn't want to ingest it particularly. Then there's magnesium oxide, which is often sold as a remedy for constipation. And for that, it works very well, but it doesn't give you much magnesium. It's not bioavailable. You can't get much magnesium out of it. So over the years, I've put together a blend of 4 different types of magnesium, and each one has a slightly different benefit. I put in magnesium taurinate, which is magnesium bound with taurine, the amino acid in that very bottle, exactly. And the reason I put in that version, because there are 50 or more I could have chosen from, is because so many people now are vegan. And for the vegans, where are they going to get the amino acid taurine from? Because you get it from Taurus the bull. So for those who aren't either taking a taurine supplement or knowing how to get round the not eating meat part of things, I put in the taurinate for them. I put in malate, which is like malic acid. Malic acid is one of the beneficial things in mother's milk, for example. Put in a little bit of citrate, but not too much. Some people just take magnesium citrate. And the problem there is they will certainly relieve their constipation if they've got it. But before they can get to maybe a meaningful dose of magnesium, they're in the bathroom with diarrhea. So I put in a tiny amount of citrate, just enough to help the people who have bowel issues, but not enough to just send them immediately to the loo. And then the big one is bisglycinate, and that's bound with glycine. Glycine, another amino acid, is super useful for the body for a whole host of reasons. So what I found is all the time people say, oh, I tried magnesium. So I ask them what type, usually they don't know. How many did you take? Usually one or maybe two. The problem is that the amount that we're meant to take, and normally we'd get it in green leafy vegetables and stuff, is meant to be, according to the RDA, the recommended daily allowance, which was, by the way, designed for soldiers in the Second World War as the minimum to stop them getting ill. It wasn't the amount to make them better, just enough to stop them getting ill. But then food was a different quality. You know, things hadn't been so hybridized, so made sweet. You know, carrots used to be purple back in the day and white and cream colored before that. So the food then, 100 years ago, was a different thing, much more potent, you might say, more full of nutrients. But now, with the damaged soils and the hybridization and stuff like that, and the herbicides, we're just not getting the nutrition that we used to get. So is 400 milligrams or 380 for women appropriate these days? Well, no, it's absolutely not. So the capsules, my capsules, are 700 milligrams. So that sounds like a lot, but it's not, because that 700 milligrams is, for instance, the magnesium with the citric acid, which makes magnesium citrate. So only maybe 10% or something is actually elemental magnesium.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So people are fooling themselves because they don't know, and the product companies often in no way make it plain that this is not what it seems. So personally, what suits me is 8 capsules a day.
Mm.
8 sounds ridiculous, but actually it's not that much in terms of bulk, because you know, people say, well, can I just take one multi-mineral, multivitamin? Could that possibly work? Well, you know, some people don't need as much as 8. Some people might need 4 or 6. Some people have benefited from 10 or 12. However, you can't fit 10 or 12 capsules in one. And that's just one mineral, let alone all the other stuff.
I love it. I'm going to sort of take it back for the listeners a little bit, because one of the ways Clive and I have got a lot of similarities in terms of why we're so passionate about this. I actually used to have my own herb shop up until 2020, and the only reason I did that is because I was working with human and animal clients, Clive, and I was then working with them as a natural holistic practitioner, and then they were asking me for recommendations, and I was so horrified by the quality of both the animal and human supplements that were on the market. But I'm going to come back to a couple of things before we dive into some of our deepest ones, because magnesium is always top of my list as well. But let's explain to the listeners, Clive, why you and I on platforms that we're going out of have to be so careful about the way we talk about supplementation. It's very tricky, isn't it, for people with websites like you and I have got, for people sharing information in videos, to really talk about the miraculous changes that people can make to all aspects of their physical and mental health, talking about these natural products.
Well, you know, it's funny that the pharmaceutical industry can effectively do what they like, but for the natural health industry, let's say, I mean, this is the most hilarious example. Let's say I said to you, water can hydrate you, right? Now, to satisfy the regulators, we would have had to have done a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. What placebo would work when you're comparing it with water? Can you think of one, right? So, strictly speaking, as I understand it, if I were to claim that water hydrates you without proof that's acceptable to the authorities, I think it could be 2 years in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, how crazy does it get? So if I do mention a medical term, I am incorrectly spelling it for
Completely.
legal reasons.
And I wanted to cover that to people because it's very difficult for general members of the public to realise just the ridiculous hoops we have to go through to share this information. So you'll have heard, everyone listening, you'll have heard a medical disclaimer at the start of this this podcast. And this also comes to when you're reading the instructions, just like Clive covered about the amount of the daily amount. So Clive and I are different. We live in different environments, although we're both in the UK. We've got different constitutional strengths and weaknesses, different stresses that are hitting us all the time. So the amount of magnesium that Clive might need and I might need might change. And also it will change over time with seasons, with what you're eating, with the stress you're under. So we're going to come on and cover all these things in a little bit more detail. But before we come on to some of our favourites, one of the questions we get asked all the time, Clive, is why, if we're eating a balanced diet, which means something different to everyone anyway, why do we in today's age need to supplement?
Well, we've sort of covered that in a way already because the food isn't what it used to be. I mean, let's say when I was growing up, I grew up with my grandparents for a while, and they would get the milk delivered on an electric vehicle, and it would be yellow colored with a huge layer of cream on top. And if you didn't get there fast enough, the birds would pick through the metal foil and nick your cream.
That's right. Yeah.
So if my grandparents saw milk today in the supermarket and they noticed that it was white, they wouldn't recognize it as milk. They would think it's something that's a white liquid. In that time period, all the cows were Jerseys, Guernseys, and the more old-fashioned types. But when they brought in the black and white Holsteins, for example, the ones you see them walking along waiting to be milked with udders that look impossibly large, that just doesn't look comfortable, right? The quality of the milk changed. And, there's A1 milk and A2 milk. A1 milk, you'd think is the best. No, that's not. The A2 milk is the best. You want your milk from a cow that hasn't been previously poisoned. And the issue is, let's say you're lucky enough to be drinking milk from an organically bred cow. Legally, organic farmers can still put inorganic hay, straw, as bedding. Do cows eat their bedding? Well, yes, they do. I used to have a cow at one point. However, the average cow should graze on the land, right? Yeah. Eating wild herbs. I had a shack in the woods at one point where there were cows in a forest, and they loved eating the leaves off the trees, absolutely adored it. A forest diet for a cow would be normal, right?
Clues in the name. I do tell people with their horses and things, they're called herbivores, not grassivores. That's,
Good point.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem is that the dairy farms that are doing it for money are often feeding their cows grains. Now, if you feed grains to cows, their life is shortened dramatically. I mean, a quarter of the lifespan or something. So they sometimes give them antibiotics because they're not well, because you fed them the wrong food, they haven't had the herbs. But also they give them antibiotics, it makes them fat. It fattens them up. So, of course, they can't clean the antibiotics out, so we're getting that secondhand. Then it's going into the water supply, those antibiotics and the birth control pills or whatever, and coming through the water recycling plant. And people are foolish enough to drink the stuff without filtering it.
Completely. And one of the things that I've seen for years, because unfortunately, a lot of problems show up in animals quite faster than they show up in humans, because animals, generally speaking, have a shorter lifespan, and also they're more in contact, you hope, a little even in today's age, not so much so, but in nature with humans. And so the quality of our soil is so depleted from the modern farming practices now, that actually if you look at an apple off a tree and the vitamins and minerals that are in the apple, it's just a fraction of what we used to get 100 years ago, isn't it?
Well, I had an organic farm for 10 years. And when I came back to England, because I was out in Spain, I started speaking to farmers when I met them. And I said, tell me about if they had nice apples. So tell me about your apples. Well, what have you done this year? They said, oh, well, we sprayed them 7 times. Then we sprayed them some more in the next month and more in the next month, about 27 different sprays. And then we waxed them, obviously, to keep the sprays from not washing off. So when you see those apples that are waxy, that's because they've been sprayed. I mean, it's horrendous what modern farming practices are doing, really very dangerous. Let's just go back to milk briefly. People think that semi-skimmed or skimmed is better. No, it's not. People get fat. People put on more weight having semi-skimmed than they do full fat. People are just so misled by the press and, low cholesterol, eat low cholesterol, but then people get mental issues in later age. I'm trying to avoid
Yes, we've
technical names.
our words here. It's so, so true. So I think everyone's realizing it's a pretty complex issue. And the reality is most of us have to supplement ourselves, and quality really matters. So working with someone that's really looking at the quality of the type of products and how they're being made, fillers and binders is a big issue, isn't it, Clive?
Well, it is. Obviously the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry has bought out many of the natural health supplement companies. So over the years, we've become independent. So we've got our own encapsulation machines, our own bottling machines, and we try wherever possible not to source from China. Basically, the European standards, while I object to a lot of standards, on one hand, can be very useful from a quality perspective. So we know what we're getting is what we're told we're getting. Obviously, we can analyze things further down the line, but quality is super important, as we mentioned with the magnesium, the quantity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quantity issue, isn't it? Because on to some of our favorites. I've got your fantastic starting point. We've already covered magnesium a lot, but can you explain to people what are some of the main signs of magnesium deficiency? Because I think the statistics, the official statistics, which take those with a pinch of salt, but the reality is virtually everyone now is deficient in magnesium. What symptoms might people start seeing, Clive, if they've got a magnesium deficiency?
Well, once you've got a magnesium deficiency, you now cannot relax your body properly. Every cell of the body can't relax as it should do. And if that got to an extreme and you couldn't relax your heart so it could, after it's beat, it could unbeat, so to speak, that would be called a heart attack. So that's one extreme. So let's look at some of the smaller things, excuse me, and see if you've got one of the symptoms, or maybe you've got two, or maybe more. So twitches. Twitches is magnesium deficiency. Restless leg, where the leg kicks out at night. You wake up in the morning with a muscle cramp, really painful for a few minutes. Could be constipation, could be poor sleep, could be headaches, migraines, even epilepsy. It could be heart arrhythmia, where your heart's racing for no apparent reason. What else could it be? Any joint pains, muscle pains, bad back. There are so many symptoms, but, for instance, I had this woman come to me a couple of years ago or so now, who was suicidally depressed. She told me her story and it was just ghastly. And she said, what can I do? There must be something that can stop this feeling. So I told her to take 2 magnesium capsules 6 times that day and 2 magnesium capsules 6 times the next day. She rings me up about 8 o'clock in the evening, the second evening, and says I'm no longer suicidal. But she needed like a very large amount. I'm sure after that she could have backed down and found the level that gave her the happiness she wanted. But when you're in a situation where everything seems impossible, overwhelm, you can't think straight because
Yeah.
you're so tense. So magnesium is the ultimate relaxer in many ways. So much so that if somebody is rushed to the emergency room because they're having a heart attack, the enlightened doctors know that you can literally inject Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate right in, and within a few seconds, it's released the heart, boom, they're breathing again.
I love it. Now, this brings me on to one of the things I really wanted to speak to you about, because there is an epidemic of stress. And the way I look at stress, Clive, is, you can get physical stress, chemical stress, emotional stress. And magnesium is so important for people that have got stress coming from any of those different areas. Talk us through, from your understanding, about, first and foremost, why is everyone so stressed at the moment? And secondly, if someone comes to you and they're feeling either physical signs of stress or emotional signs of stress, what are your go-to ones?
Well, so clearly, with what we've discussed, the poor diet, no magnesium in the food, uh, add that to chemtrails and you name it, we're being assaulted with toxins from every side. We're getting emotional toxic poisoning from watching the news, if one was foolish enough to do that, or reading a newspaper or something. I mean, the biggest weapon against humanity is fear.
Yeah.
And fear is almost free. They tell you to be frightened of something. I found myself a few years ago stocking up with food because I thought food Armageddon was around the corner. You know, so I consider myself to be a bit on the ball, but I certainly wasn't with that one. I fell for the fear. So if anybody is feeling fearful, the first thing is assess is the fear an assumption or actual fact? And then realizing that if we're already low on magnesium, we can't deal with even more stress, which makes us more stressed. Once you run out of magnesium, things can go wrong quite rapidly. So we're not eating enough vegetables. Maybe a lot of people aren't. Too many carbs, perhaps. Carbs are cheap.
Mm.
It's one of the problems. So there are things that go with magnesium as well, like vitamin C. So if magnesium in my book is number one, number two is vitamin C. It is so powerful.
So, so important. I've got mine here at the moment. I love it. I love it. Yeah. So talk us through the vitamin C and magnesium link.
Well, it's always interesting to watch what they don't want you to know.
Yeah.
And if you look up ascorbic acid, which is the version you just picked up, which is the inexpensive, old-fashioned vitamin C that isn't a fruit or a vegetable, it was the first sort of extract that came out, as far as I'm aware. First time I ever saw that work was with a terminal stage 4. In astrology, there's the sign of the crab. For that particular astrological sign, that's the one we're talking about. And this guy had had one kidney removed, and he was told he had weeks left to live. And I spoke to him, and he said, I haven't got another kidney left to spare. What should I do? And actually, he already had the answer himself. He approached Linus Pauling, who was Mr. Vitamin C, you might say. And he said, take 35 grams of vitamin C, ascorbic acid in divided doses during each day. Now, some people take 1 gram, which is sort of almost nothing, but 35 grams. So let's imagine for a moment. No, sorry, well, let me come back to it. Anyway, 20 years later, he died. It wasn't from cancer. So you look up ascorbic acid dangers, for instance, the internet is full of people saying ascorbic acid is no good. You need pure fruit powder. It's synthetic. You mustn't use it. But if you were to take 35 grams of vitamin C in the terms of fruit powder, you'd be dying in dust. It would be impossible. And so, but some people have needed 100 grams of vitamin C. Some people have needed even more. So let's say you or I are eating well, and in the old days, we wouldn't have needed any vitamin C, obviously. When I had the organic farm, I never supplemented with anything, didn't need to. But back in England, it's slightly different. So if we took, let's say, half a teaspoonful of vitamin C twice a day, that would be more than enough. And if we took much more than that, we might end up with diarrhea, because with magnesium and vitamin C, the body is so intelligent, it's self-regulating. So if you take too much at one time or too much over a day, you're in the bathroom with diarrhea. Yeah, now you know what the overdose was, so to speak, but it's harmless, right? So if we took a lot, that's where we'd be. But I had a couple a while ago. Both of them were not feeling well, but it was hard to know why they weren't feeling well. But it's clear they seem to have a low level of infection going on. And generally, infections, I would say, are actually detoxification events. It's not like you've caught something. Anyway, so I told them to take, they were fairly elderly, so I think I told them to take a quarter of a teaspoonful every 15 minutes. He gets up to about 25 grams. He reaches his limit. She rings me up at the end of the day. How are you doing? She said, I've taken 85 grams so far and still haven't ended up in the bathroom.
Wow.
Which means that she was way more ill than he was, because the body will take in as much as it needs. And so if you find yourself testing yourself on vitamin C, find the tolerance level on a day when you're near a bathroom. And then if you're seriously unwell, consider backing off like 5%, 10% from that. And you may have to keep knocking it down as you get better. On the Secret Health Club, my private members site, there are many interviews with doctors and others about vitamin C and how to use it. And the reason I came to having so many videos about it was my dad, when he got to about 93, got septicemia, sepsis. And they shoved him in hospital, filled him full of antibiotics, and luckily he survived. Then he did it again and again. He was eating most of his food from the supermarket, really, which wasn't too great. Anyway, so he wouldn't listen to a word I said about vitamin C. So I started interviewing every medical doctor that I knew. Say, tell me about septicemia. And he never got septicemia again. Oh.
I love it. And you said so many important things there. A couple I just wanted to bring out to people, because everyone's bombarded with information at the moment. And I think one of the things that's really, really key is getting people to tune in and listen to their bodies, because, what I might need one day when, they're spraying all sorts of stuff in the sky, I haven't had time to get myself healthy food and I'm feeling rather stressed, might be very different to what I need the next day. So this ability to tune in and honestly assess where we're at, and adjust things accordingly, because it's so important for people taking back their health, isn't it, Clive? Yeah, so getting people to tune in, how important is that?
Well, we are incredibly intuitive beings, but because we went to school, we have most of that beaten out of us. And over the years, I'd become aware that I was getting intuitive messages. I think one of the first times I noticed it was a long time ago. One of my daughters, when she was really, really young, came running through the room with a glass of water, and I could see that she was going to spill it. And I said the wrong thing. I said, don't spill that. The subconscious doesn't hear the word don't, subconscious doesn't hear negatives. So she heard spill it and did. The next day, my other daughter came in doing exactly the same thing. This time I was prepared and said, hold on to it tight, watch your step. And she was fine. So then I noticed with myself but just before I knocked the glass of water off the table, I'd had a message saying, do something about that glass of water, otherwise you're going to knock it off. So I began to realize that actually I'm intuitive. We're all intuitive, And so when you get the little messages, it's worth listening to them, I think.
It really is. I think, again, there's a lot of these deficiencies, we'll probably come into this in another video, can but really affect our sort of mental clarity big time. So shall we run through for the listeners some of your other favourites in your core box? So we've already sort of covered the magnesium and the vitamin C, and those are really key for all of us. And obviously everyone's watching from different parts of the world. We've got different climates, different food availabilities, different stresses, different ages. But what would be the next one on your list for most of us in terms of to take a look at?
It's got to be iodine.
Yeah.
Iodine is so inexpensive. A year's supply is like £25. You know, just couldn't be cheaper. And that's the small bottle, which is even cheaper than that. So, in Japan, up until recently, they didn't have a word in their lexicon for menopause because the women and men had ate so much seaweed, you know, that really it's every meal. And a lot of sea fish, which also contains iodine. You know, the richest source of iodine is seaweed. That's why people living by the coast often are slightly better health-wise than the ones inland because of all the iodine they're ingesting in the air. So what happens if you're low on iodine, and why does it happen? Well, why it happens is that if you are using unfiltered water that has chlorine in it, or worse still, fluoride, it knocks out the iodine in the whole body, particularly in the thyroid. So anybody with a thyroid issue, that's probably an iodine deficiency underlying it. So if you have a bath in chlorinated water, it is a disaster, you know, much worse than maybe drinking it even. So I did a little 4-minute video beginning of last year, got 4 glasses of tap water. I got some chlorine indicator drops, put a couple of drops in, the first glass goes green. Second glass, I put my fingers in for 5 seconds. Chlorine indicator drops, it doesn't go green. Third glass, I got a really thin slice of raw potato, put it in for 3 seconds and pulled it out. Chlorine indicator drops, no. Where had the chlorine gone? Into your body, into your food. So chlorine gas was well known in the First World War as a very effective poison gas. They killed millions of people. So if you can you go in your bathroom and you can smell chlorine gas, you know, this is not a health product. And it's dead easy to filter the stuff out. For instance, if you run a bath, before you run it, put in a teaspoonful or so of vitamin C powder, then run the bath. That will neutralize the chlorine. If you've got fluoride, get some borax, not borax substitute, has to be genuine borax. Put that in the bath, that will neutralize the fluoride pretty much. You know, there are things you can do. I mean, on my website, I have a vitamin C shower filter, for instance, a big block of heavy vitamin C. And I've had lots of people actually tell me their skin felt better. I had one guy, before I did the vitamin C filter, I just was recommending on eBay, you can get filters for like 10 quid or something, you can just bolt on. And I gave one to one guy who had terrible eczema on the top of his head. 6, 7 days later, he'd also taken some of the supplements, not many, but some. His eczema on the top of his head completely cleared up. And I said, well, you took the vitamin C, you took the magnesium and so on. What do you think it was? He said, oh, it must have been the shower filter. Every day he'd been poisoning the top of his head.
I think water quality, we'll cover that in a separate one. It's absolutely crucial. It really is. I think I've got a background in water quality, and I honestly don't think most of us realise how big an issue it is. So that I absolutely love the iodine. And again, these are so affordable for people. It's like Christmas where we take it in turns here, opening presents. The next one I'm going to ask you to speak about has to be actually my all-time favourite, the Fulvic. Now, the fulvic minerals, so important for anyone that's got animals as well. But talk us through why this is one of your top 10, Clive.
Well, the scientists reckon that the mine, the deposit of Earth where the fulvic minerals are extracted from, is 30 million years old. There are other deposits, there's some in Utah that are supposedly 110 million years old, but I don't like those ones so much. They use them for agricultural purposes and so on. But there's a tiny mine, about half a mile, but there's enough material there for hundreds of years, where they do a water extraction, and something must have happened 30 million years ago. So supposedly, everything was bigger then. Supposedly there were 4 times more species at that period of time. And so whether it was a volcano collapsing on I don't know, who knows. However, there are these sections around the world where the fulvic and humic minerals are super rich. And by the way, underneath where you're standing, the earth below contains fulvic and humic minerals,
Absolutely.
or it used to,
Mm.
should do, would have done. Anyway, so because you're basically what you've got, in an ancient forest, everything that's ever lived or died, every flower, every bird, every animal, everything, every twig has fallen to the forest floor and become compressed and condensed and so on. So if you like, in fulvic minerals, all life is there. In teeny tiny amounts, there's every amino acid, there's everything pretty much. So it's not just that we thrive on trace minerals. And if you notice, the average multi-mineral in the shop will say it's got 28 minerals in it. Okay, well, what about the other 60 odd, 70 odd? What about them? Are they not important? They're about 93 or something like that, but there may be others they haven't discovered yet. So it's not just us that benefit from the microelements, it's also the gut bacteria. So, for instance, scientists will tell you there is no part of the human body, there's no human cell that uses the mineral yttrium, which is fairly prominent in fulvic minerals. And they're right. But the bacteria, which outnumber us 9 to 1 anyway, they have to have yttrium. So, what multi-mineral generally has yttrium in? Well, sort of none of them. So fulvic minerals cover the teeny tiny trace elements, whereas magnesium is big and bulky, as we've discussed.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. So we've got a few other goodies in here. What's next on your list?
Well, selenium. I've stopped doing it now because I've sort of, if you like, learned the questions to ask that usually give me the answers I want. I used to do mineral testing with, sophisticated devices. And one of the things that people who do mineral testing often notice is that people who've got symptoms like fibromyalgia, they're just weak and so on, they're almost all low, not just on magnesium and vitamin C, but also on selenium. Pretty much 99% of them are going to have a selenium deficiency. And when I was young, you used to be able to get a shampoo for dandruff, which proudly said with selenium. Because if you add selenium to your skin, lots of skin problems get better, but your muscles everything is made better. We need every mineral. We need every vitamin, really. And so if you're missing one, really serious things can happen, depending on which one it might be. But selenium is so useful. You only need one drop. There are various versions out there, capsules, tablets, whatever. But over the years, I've discovered that the liquid version that we do is off the charts different. And you just need one drop, maybe every day or every 2 days. I'm not good at regularity, so I take a squirt, maybe 10 drops every couple of weeks or something. Again, I have to trust my intuition there. But because I've watched all the videos, I've interviewed one of the big experts on it. And if anybody wants to learn about selenium, this guy has got the beans. So when I first came across it in a extraordinary way, I was very, very interested about 35 years ago in getting people off drugs, particularly heroin and methadone and the nasty ones. And I was researching stuff like iboga, which is a root plant from Africa, which I could tell you about another time. But I was looking at selenium because back in New York, they did methadone trials where they wanted to see what was the most effective thing to get people off heroin. And the liquid selenium turned out to be the number one. As far as I understand, they then buried that because it wasn't they wanted a pharmaceutical result. They didn't want a natural result. So to give you an example, I had a guy ring me up, and he'd been on ADHD medication for about 20 years. And he tried numerous times to come off them, but the withdrawal was so bad, he was always back on them over and over. So I told him to take 20 drops of the liquid selenium. Now, if you look up that much selenium on Google or somewhere, it will kill you. But that's not this type of selenium. But so it's frightening. You look up that amount. Oh my God, you're going to die for sure. Anyway, he probably did that because he didn't do that. He chickened out and took eight drops. So on 8 drops, what happened 3 days later? I only told him to take that for 3 days and then cut back to 1 every couple of days or whatever. So he takes 8 drops 3 days, comes off the ADHD medication, stays off, no problem. Why? Because selenium has a very unusual action. It does many, many things, but one of the actions it has is to turn off antitoxins. So if you're taking a toxin like heroin, every day you're putting in a toxin, your body, being very intelligent, wants to help you, creates antitoxins to try and balance things out. So if somebody gives up alcohol, they give up heroin, whatever it is, just like that, the body hasn't worked out. You've stopped putting the toxin in. So selenium turns off certain antitoxins, making withdrawal so much easier. Huge.
It's fascinating because in the horsey world, I do a lot of work with horses, and in the horse world, selenium deficiency is a huge issue, and often associated with metabolic disorders and also behavior issues. So yeah, it's a biggie. So let me take Potluck next. Vitamin D3. Now, all of us who are in the UK will know all about vitamin D3 deficiency. Other people in other sunnier parts of the world might not so much. So talk us through your D3 and why we need it. And in the last 4 years, I will just say everyone in we'll call it the pandemic, things like this are literally lifesavers.
Well, coming on for not quite 20 years ago, up until then, I used to get a cold, used to have a detox. My temperature would rise, I'd be burning off stuff, lots of snot would come out, a cold, right? A detox. And I read about vitamin D3 deficiency, and it was November, so I went to the doctor. I said, could you do a vitamin D test for me? So I've never done one of those before. I said, oh, really? And he rings me up. Takes 2 weeks or something for the test to come back, which is ridiculous. You can do a finger prick test, in a second. Anyway, he didn't know that, which is fine. And he rang me up and said, how did you know you were so low on vitamin D? You're virtually off the charts low. I said, well, it's November. There's no sun. Obviously, you, and everybody else are going to be probably low on vitamin D. And if somebody's got dark skin, they might be low on vitamin D in this country in the summer. So he recommended 400 IUs with calcium. Now, I knew that was stupid. Nobody wants to take calcium as a supplement unless there's a reason or a type. So instead of 400 IUs, I took 10,000 IUs. And I have never had a cold since. Not one. And I don't do it every day or anything. But if it hasn't been sunny for a couple of weeks, I might do it every day for a short time. But again, a lot of people want to balance that with vitamin K2, which is one of the other ones in there. So if doctors are taught incorrectly about calcium most of the time. They believe that if you've got arthritis or you've got osteoporosis or something, that you need calcium. No, you don't. You've got enough calcium already. What you need to do is to transfer it from where it shouldn't be, calcifying the arteries or wherever, arthritis, to in the bones and into the teeth. So K2 and vitamin D are the key to healthy teeth and bones. I mean, in the old days, we would have been given cod liver oil.
Yes, I remember it well. I'm still traumatized by it. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, was the cod liver oil you were given rancid? Did it come fresh from the fridge or did it come from Granny's cupboard? because most people using oils don't realize, even if they got a good sell-by date on, that they're probably rancid,
Yeah,
either because they haven't looked after it. What fish product don't you keep in the fridge, right?
exactly.
Um, but with all the oils, the the way, well, I've got an old-fashioned seed grinder, and you can't turn it unless you put a candle under where the grinding mechanism is to get the oil warm enough so you can actually grind the oil out. But in modern day, they use like a 20-ton ram press and high heat, which destroys the quality of the oil. So people getting sunflower oil just from a supermarket, they're rotting their brains, they're messing with their arteries, you know, seed oils can be a real, real problem.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. I love this. I just think I hope people are realizing these are such simple but so powerful. So next on the list, let's go zinc. Let's go for zinc.
Yeah. So, when we were children, we might have noticed from time to time we had wet white dots on our fingernails.
Absolutely. And your grandparents, and in the old days, actually, doctors would look at your nails and skin and tongue and eyes.
Well,
Yeah,
doctors used to be taught health.
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
in the old days.
Yeah.
So, and some people, when they're adults, get white dots on their fingernails. That's a sure sign of a zinc deficiency. And in the old days, you could possibly say to somebody, "When's your birthday?" If they said it's a month ago, then when you look at 1 month down the fingernail, and there's a white dot where they binged on sugar and knocked their zinc out, right? So, uh, if you get, the keys to not getting a cold really are vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc. There are other things, but those are the big keys. So, when I got ill 40 years ago with the antibiotic poisoning, was trying to figure out what was wrong. I went to a natural health guy who said, "Right, I'm going to give you a little drink of zinc." And it was zinc sulfate. And he said, "I want you to tell me what it tastes like." And it tasted really sweet, like loads of sugar, really, really sweet. That means your body wants it. It's sweet, therefore you want it. He gave me some zinc capsules, told me to come back in 3 weeks. Same test with the drink, and I wanted to spit it out. It was almost so much. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I gave you too much zinc." So you can get a zinc taste test. It's available online, and you can test yourself. Start taking some zinc, see if it's enough. If it still tastes sweet, or if it tastes like water, you still need more. It's when it starts to taste, when it begins to taste a little bit minerally, well, it's a little bit metallic. That's the right level. Anything above that's too much. So, the body is so intelligent if you know how to tap, how to ask.
Oh, I love this so much. We're going to have another discussion on this because this ties in so much to the self-medication and also how much the naughty bacteria, I know everyone calls them bad bacteria, but will mislead you in those decision makings if you kill off too many of the wrong ones. So fantastic. So let's go for the vitamin B complex now.
Well, at one point a few years ago, one of my daughters said that she was really feeling tired, like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. So initially I thought, well, maybe that's low blood sugar. She's eaten something too sweet or too carby at lunchtime, sending her blood sugar high. Now she's crashed, but it didn't seem to be that. So I thought, well, okay, maybe it's B vitamin deficiency. So I gave her the blend of B vitamins, and she rang up the next afternoon. So I'm full of energy. Haven't been like that for a few weeks. And for her, it was the answer. My daughter likes to go the vegan route quite often, and when she's on one of those trips, she's probably not getting enough of all sorts of things. But the B vitamins generally come from animal products. Yes, you can get them from fermented foods if you know what you're doing. But the big problem for vegans really is lack of B vitamins at the end of the day, B12. And many women will know particularly that if they're told they're running low on B12, they have an injection from the doctor, and suddenly they're bouncing off the walls with energy for a few weeks. So, but you don't have to have injections to do it. You can do it with capsules. So the important thing is if you're taking any one B vitamin, to take them all. So I mean, the highlights of B vitamins, B1 is often the remedy for people who've got pins and needles, lack of feeling in fingers and feet, hands and feet. So B1 is, most diabetics, for instance, get neuropathy, tingling, and so on. That's a B1 deficiency, but they may need more than is in the B complex that you just showed. So I do a B1 as a separate add-on. Some people need a few. Then the next big one, let's say, is B3. Oh, by the way, B1 is the remedy for, well, I shouldn't say that. Anybody who's anorexic is almost bound to be low on B1. Want to fix anorexia? Eating disorders, B1's a good one to look at. Vitamin B3 is about happiness. Bill W., the guy who founded Alcoholics Anonymous, was bipolar, manic depressive, whatever you want to call it. And that was probably the reason he became an alcoholic. After he started Alcoholics Anonymous, they got the 12 steps. He went to Abraham Hoffer, who was a psychiatrist in Canada, for his depression. And Dr. Hoffer gave him a number of vitamins, but specifically vitamin B3 in ever-increasing doses. I think it was 10 days later, end of depression. He goes back to AA, who's now being run by other people, and said, I want to make it the 13th step. They sacked him. They didn't believe that vitamins were the answer. Anyway, so niacin in the right amount. There's a fantastic story of this girl who was so depressed, all she did was sit in the corner and rock. They started giving her increasing doses of vitamin B3, and then within no time at all, she was back at the kitchen table as if nothing had ever happened. Schizophrenia, number of things, So vitamin B3 is otherwise known as niacin. And if anybody's interested in it, there is a book called Niacin, which is unbelievable. All the stories, I've just told you a fraction of what niacin can do. But there are two versions. One, which gives you a flush. And the first time I tried it, I took a gram of it, which was a big mistake. Forgot I'd taken it, got in the car, started driving. About 10 minutes later, I think I'm having a heart attack. I've gone purple. I've gone purple. My heart's going, and I remembered that I wasn't meant to take 1,000 milligrams. I was meant to take 25 milligrams to start with. Anyway, when I realized that I wasn't dying, so I really thought I was, I thought that was it. So my advice is don't take too much. Don't be brave. Start slow, and then you can build it up. What happens is you chase the flush upwards. But that's for people who want to sort out arteries. For people who want to sort out their mind, you do not need the flushing type. There's a non-flushing type. And so in mine, I do a blend of niacin. I put a tiny bit of the flushing version, but mainly the non-flushing version. The advantage of the flushing version is that it helps, clear the arteries, move, increase circulation. But some people will feel the flush, even though there's only, I think, 25 milligrams or less in there. And the trick is, whenever you take a B vitamin, take it with food. If you take it with food, then it's fine.
Perfect.
Can I give you a few others? B6, happiness.
Yeah.
B9, don't use folic acid, use folates and methylated. So the B vitamins are methylated, which means that they're good for most people as opposed to the unmethylated. Then there's B12, which is energy incarnate. There are other ones in between, but everybody should try the B vitamin complex because, well, like everything in the box, most people are going to notice something significant with either one of the supplements or a combination of, they do really work.
They really do work. I cannot express enough. And again, when you're sort of really going on this journey, it's such fun. We'll come on to your club finally to finish with. We've got one more to do before that. But when you start going on this journey of educating yourself and looking out for the symptoms and matching it, you can apply this to your animals. Although please don't give these supplements to animals because they need forms often in different advices. So you need to take in different amounts and different ways. So this is a fantastic one to finish off in your magic thing, the sodium bicarbonate. Now, I'm laughing about this because there's so much misinformation out there on sodium bicarbonate. So why is this one of your favourites, Clive?
Well, when I was first starting out, I realized that the doctors' medical books prior to about 1935 were full of natural remedies. And one of the big ones used to be called the Merck Manual, made by Merck, the pharmaceutical company, when they were still real. And you look up sodium bicarbonate, like 120 or more remedies that were in the doctors were taught how to sort of remedy almost everything with bicarb. Over the years, there have been doctors injecting bicarb straight into tumors. Bicarb was one of the top medical, so to speak, drugs at the time. It's a very natural product, clearly. One of the ways to use it is before you go to bed, just put quarter of a teaspoonful, say, of bicarb in water. If you're under 40, you could maybe have a half teaspoonful, not more, and drink it before bed. That will put you into an alkaline state while you're sleeping. And when you're sleeping, that's the major time of healing all the organs and so on. So a tiny bit of bicarb just before bed is an interesting way to use it. A lot of people use it to turn off stomach acid, but this is a big mistake. You don't want to turn off stomach acid. Somebody's getting acid reflux, for instance. That is a lack of stomach acid. The acid that they're feeling isn't stomach acid, it's another acid. So, many uses for bicarb. It's incredible research what you can actually do with the stuff. But I put it in for just mainly that purpose alone. But I've done videos on bicarb, and as have many other people. It's a fascinating, really cheap material, and a lot of emergency doctors used to use bicarb with stroke victims.
Yes.
Somebody comes in with a stroke, wham, magnesium and bicarb, that's going to release everything.
I love it. I love it. So I could talk to you all day, but we've probably come to the end of this one. Now, before we can't leave without telling everyone about your health club. So talk us through what the health club is and why people are going to find this invaluable, which it is.
Well, you're doing good work when they chuck you off YouTube, right?
Okay.
They chucked me off in 2014 before I think anybody. I had the government come to me and say, if you're going to put out more videos, we want 2 weeks warning, what the script, I don't do scripts, of what you're going to say so we can check that it's correct from a health perspective. So they forced me, they threatened, literally £250,000 fine, not that I had it, if I didn't take them down within 24 hours. So I thought, luckily I soon got them back up again. But so I thought, right, well, I'll start a private members club where everything they don't want you to know is there, because behind a private members club, you can do anything you like, So that was 10 years ago. So now it's built up into sort of a library of A to Z of information, really. Obviously not everything is there, but you look up your problem or problems, and there's a good chance that you're going to get straight to the meat of the matter. Yeah. So when I stopped doing consultations, I do them occasionally, but when I stopped doing them, people say, well, who should I go to? I say, well, look, way cheaper than me to consult with, join the Secret Health Club. And if you can't find all the answers you need there, then I might consult with you, but it's there. And generally that's worked. So I've got more time than I used to have. I'm not doing so many consultations because I'd much rather give a talk or do a podcast with you where there's not just one person listening, but hopefully a few more. So the Secret Health Club. Now, it's I've got a small staff who run it, but basically I believe information should be free. Yes, it costs £83 or $100 US to join it. However, if you can't afford that, drop me an email, say what you can afford, we'll do it for that. If you're broke, can't afford anything, we'll sign you up for free. So that's how it works. Luckily, enough people pay that it works.
It's a brilliant resource. Every single person should be joining for that, because knowledge is power, knowledge protects. And the knowledge we have to have as we need to start listening to ourselves and taking this time to educate yourself is so powerful. Now, there's going to be a link below. We're very lucky. Clive's given us a discount code for the listeners of this channel. So please use that. My call to action, and I want to finish off with yours, Clive, is do not wait until something goes wrong. Start building up your resilience. Start having these things in stock for when you need it. There's nothing more disturbing for me when I get all these calls on a Saturday night, a Sunday night, and people have got nothing in stock. So hopefully I'll be persuading Clive to come back and do some more, but there's a lot of resources there. Get some of the essentials in, start tuning in with yourself, seeing the difference it can make, because when we're clear mentally, when we're physically strong and resistant, we're much less controllable. Any final words from you, Clive?
Well, it's simple, really. Try not to put the toxins in. Why does vitamin C work so well? Because it detoxifies you. Why does selenium work so well? Detoxifies you. Most of these supplements are dual purpose. Fulvic minerals, for example, detoxifies you. So the thing is, if we can afford to eat more sensibly, I mean, shampoo, for instance, let's say you buy a chemical shampoo, 99p, a natural one, 3.99 or 4.99. I don't want to, when I'm in the shower and my pores are wide open, I don't want to rub chemicals right into my brain. I don't want to rub chemicals into my bloodstream. So, everything, I'm very lucky and I can buy natural stuff, but where it's not much money, let's say, you haven't got a lot of money, the difference between organic milk and non-organic milk isn't much. Same with bread, same with quite a lot of things. Try cutting as many poisonous chemical toxins out of your life as you possibly can.
I love it. I love it. And don't forget, everything you learn for yourself, make sure you're looking after your animals too. Thank you so much for your time, Clive. I absolutely love it. Thank you everyone for watching this. Please do share it. Please do. The link will go below about how to get a discount, how to get in contact, get all Clive's stuff. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm really pleased to have had the opportunity to talk to your wonderful audience.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. This helps us spread the word and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. And above all, stay curious and stay free.